Hello and welcome to a new video, and a very special train video, because today we are going on a very long train ride again. We are going from Frankfurt in a TGV Duplex to Marseille, and here on the map you can see our route today. We are starting in the afternoon in Frankfurt. I parked my car at the airport of Frankfurt at Parkhaus Platzhirsch. I took the shuttle to the airport, and from there I'm taking the S-Bahn to the main station of Frankfurt. And then, of course, I planned some extra time to make sure that I arrived there on time, so I had a bit of a waiting time, but the TGV was also arriving 1 hour before the departure, so we can take a look at its arrival. Now it's also time to take a look at the interior of the TGV Duplex, or to be precise, TGV Euro Duplex, which is the version that can operate in multiple European countries. My seat today is in first class in the upper deck of the train. It comes in a 2+1 configuration. Of course, it comes with all the features you would expect. It has quite old school seats, even though these trains are not that old. They have been built from 2010, but the SNCF decided to fit it with quite old school seats. Of course, they are looking quite old, but they are very comfortable. We'll take a closer look later on. There are multiple luggage racks available throughout the train. Of course, we have some toilets that are pretty tiny, and what's also quite interesting is that you have the crossing from car to car on the upper deck. You can see another car. As you can see, they all look more or less the same. Now let's take a look at the seat. First big plus is the big and sturdy table that's perfect for working. We have footrests, of course, armrests, trash bin, power sockets. Everything that you might need is available. The seats can be adjusted electrically. It's also quite comfortable, and we of course also have a reading light. As you can see, the seats are very soft, they are very comfortable, so even for a train ride this long they are still quite comfortable. Now we are starting our journey from Frankfurt to Marseille. It will take us around 7 hours and 50 minutes to get there, and I decided to take the train because I couldn't find a suitable flight from Frankfurt to Marseille or from any other airport in southern Germany or middle Germany to Marseille. Also, the airport in Marseille is quite far away from the city center, so it also takes some additional time to get there from the airport to the city center. Here we just saw the bistro. There is no restaurant on board, so unfortunately, even on an 8-hour journey, you have no chance to go into a restaurant, and I will show you a bit more about the food quality on board later on. For now, I just decided to get a coffee and a water, and I got a little piece of chocolate as a gift. Here we are approaching Mannheim. First stop of our train outside of Frankfurt. From Mannheim we're then continuing on to Karlsruhe and Baden-Baden. Those are our stops in Germany, and after Baden-Baden we're then heading to Strasbourg, and we continue in France. So as I said, I couldn't find any suitable flight, so I decided to check the train, and I was quite surprised. The ticket for first class from Frankfurt to Marseille, including a seat reservation, was only 47 euros, so that's quite cheap. And for sure there's no other possibility to get to Marseille that cheap. Maybe there's something like a Flixbus, but of course that's too uncomfortable. The train is much more comfortable, and 47 euros is a pretty good price. Here we've just left the railway line to Basel that we have seen in multiple videos, and now we're on our way to Kiel, and after Kiel we are crossing the river Rhine, and on the middle of the bridge we are also crossing the border to France, and then we are continuing in France. Next stop will be Strasbourg. In Strasbourg we will change direction, so we have a longer stop there, and then we are continuing heading south on the French side. Here we are approaching the Rhine. Crossing it means we are also crossing borders. Now we are traveling in France, heading to our first stop there in Strasbourg. Here we are passing the home base of Croisière Europe. That's also the winter port for their cruise ships, so that's why we saw all of those cruise ships here. And now we are approaching Strasbourg-Ville, where we are changing directions. Then we are continuing on to Mulhouse-Ville. I think not too many passengers were staying on board for the whole journey. Most of them were going, for example, from Frankfurt to Lyon or to Strasbourg And of course also in France a lot of passengers boarded the train, but there were also a few passengers that, just like me, went for the whole length of the journey. 7 hours and 50 minutes is quite long. Of course a plane would be faster, but if there's no suitable flight, then the train actually is the second fastest option. Especially in France there are a lot of high-speed lines that we are using. The train could be even faster, because around Lyon we are using regular railway lines instead of the TGV, but we will see that later on. Now we are approaching Mulhouseville. To make sure that we don't have to change directions here again, we're now using a railway line that is not used that often, because we are going via Mulhouse Nord and going all the way around the city center to go into the station Mulhouseville coming from the east. That makes sure that we don't have to change direction and will save us some time. It's quite interesting to see this railway line, because as far as I know there are no other trains on that railway line except for those long distance trains. Here we are crossing the harbor of Mulhouseville and the railway line coming from Chalampé, and we're meeting with the railway line coming from Basel in Switzerland, and from now on we will be traveling on completely new railway lines for me. It's the first time to see all of what's coming next. We're continuing on a regular railway line. It's the railway line Paris-Mulhouse coming from Paris. We're on that railway line until Petit-Croix. There we are changing for the LGV Rhine-Rhône, the linear grande vitesse Rhine-Rhône, high-speed line Rhine-Rhône. And there we have our next stop at Belfort-Montbéliard TGV. That's quite typical for France. You have a lot of railway stations on those high-speed lines that are named after the closest city nearby, and the addition TGV. That means those stations are usually not in the city center, but they have usually a railway connection on to the next city or the city that they have their name from. Also here in Belfort-Montbéliard TGV you have a connection on to the city of Belfort and also a connection on to Switzerland. We're continuing with up to 320 kilometers per hour to our next stop, which will be in Besançon-Franche-Comté TGV. And from there you also have a connection again to the naming city of Besançon. But now it's time to listen to the sound of the TGV Duplex at a high speed of around 300 to 320 kilometers per hour. So as you can hear, the train is pretty quiet and nice, even if it's going at high speed, so it's a very pleasant ride on board of the TGV. We've just left the station of Besançon-Franche-Comté TGV, and now we're here at the meeting part with the railway line Dijon-Vallorbe, where we had to wait for a TGV coming from Switzerland. And now we're continuing on in the direction of Dijon, but we are not stopping at Dijon, we're turning sharply to the left before the station. Our next stop is at Chalon-sur-Saône. Here we can see the toilet of the TGV, which, as I said, is pretty tiny, as you can see here. And here we can see the food that you can order at the bistro of the TGV. And as you can see, that's not exactly what I would call fine dining. It's not the best food quality on board, so I would recommend bringing food from the outside, or don't have high expectations, because I had quite high expectations, expecting the food on a French train to be pretty good, but actually turns out it's very basic fast food, so that was not the best. In the meantime, it was already dark outside, so we are just seeing few short clips from the journey from Chalon-sur-Saône via Lyon-Part-Dieu, Avignon TGV and Aix-en-Provence TGV to Marseille-Saint-Charles. We will see that on our way back during daylight. Here we are already approaching station of Marseille-Saint-Charles, and here I'm leaving the train after 7 hours and 50 minutes with an on-time arrival at the Mediterranean Sea. That was a quite interesting feeling to board a train in Frankfurt and then leaving it at the Mediterranean Sea. That was something special. So maybe you know that Marseille is not considered to be one of the safest cities in Europe. So especially during night you have to be a bit careful in this city. So I decided to don't take any risks and book a hotel right opposite of the main station. So I was just crossing the street and I was in my hotel, because when I was arriving it was 46 minutes past 9, so quite late in the evening. Not the best time to walk around Marseille, especially if you're not sure which parts of the city are safe and which you should rather avoid. So that was a quite good option to just stay at a hotel right next to the station. Why I was going to Marseille will be the topic of the upcoming videos. We will now continue a few days later with our journey back to Frankfurt. Before us, the AVE to Spain was leaving the station, and a few minutes later, 12 minutes past 8 in the morning, we were also leaving Marseille Saint-Charles. The sun was just rising, it was beautiful light, and now we're leaving Marseille and heading to the TGV Méditerranée, where we can go up to 320 kilometers per hour. Our next stop will be in Aix-en-Provence, but before reaching Aix-en-Provence and the TGV Méditerranée, we have to go through Marseille. It's not too spectacular, there's not too much to see of the city. Highlights are the views to the port with the cruise ships and the ferries, and also you can see the Marseille sign. Just like the Hollywood sign in Los Angeles, here you have a Marseille sign, and after that sign we are already reaching the TGV Méditerranée. We can go up to 320 kilometers through the beautiful landscape of southern France, especially beautiful with the fog still there and the morning sun. Here we have the station of Aix-en-Provence TGV. This station does not have any railway connection to Aix-en-Provence or any other cities, but I guess there will be a bus connection, and also there is a train connection to Aix-en-Provence from Marseille directly. On our way from Marseille to Aix-en-Provence we also crossed the more than 5 kilometers long Tunnel de Marseille. Now we're on the TGV Méditerranée. Our next stop will be in Avignon TGV. And as I said, the journey there was extremely beautiful with the fog and the morning sun, so that was a very scenic train ride. What I also quite like about the high-speed lines in France is that there are not too many noise barriers, so you can still enjoy the beautiful landscape, you can still see something from the train window, which is not standard on high-speed lines nowadays. For example, if you're traveling on a high-speed line in Austria and also on some high-speed lines in Germany, all you will see are noise barriers. Here we are now approaching the station Avignon TGV, where you have a connection with the train to the city of Avignon. Interestingly, this train was leaving at the exact moments we were approaching the station, so maybe there was another connection later on, but I don't know that. There was also a Ouigo, which is the cheap version of the TGV, and now we are crossing the river Rhône, a very beautiful river, also very interesting for river cruises, so I hope there will be a video about a river cruise on the Rhône in the future. But now we are just crossing it by train, continuing on the TGV Méditerranée until Valence TGV, where we are continuing on the TGV Rhône-Alpes without stopping at the station of Valence TGV. We've now crossed the river Rhône multiple times and now we are approaching the station of Valence TGV, and now we can listen to our train going through that station with full speed. After Valence TGV we are continuing on the TGV Rhône-Alpes until we are approaching Lyon. We're not stopping at Lyon Saint-Exupéry TGV. Instead we are going to Lyon Parc de Dieu in the middle of the city. I'm not sure why we're doing this because it takes a lot of time. We could also continue on the LGV with a brief stop at Saint-Exupéry TGV and then continue on the high-speed line until Maconville, but instead we are now going into the city center of Lyon, stopping at the main station of Lyon, Lyon Parc Dieu, then continuing on a regular railway line via Mâcon to Chalon-sur-Saône and on to Dijon. Here we have the station of Lyon Parc de Dieu. And here we are already leaving it again, and now we're coming to a river crossing. We're crossing the river Saône, and right next to the railway line there is a very interesting building, and it's a very important building for everybody who's interested in food and culinary, because it is the restaurant of Paul Bocuse, one of the most famous chefs in the world, and one of the most famous restaurants in the world, as you can see here, the restaurant of Paul Bocuse. After that we are continuing on a regular railway line following the river Saône until we are approaching Chalon-sur-Saône, our next stop. After leaving Chalon-sur-Saône we are now heading for Dijon, but once again we will not stop at Dijon. Instead we will turning right sharply just before Dijon and then continue on heading again to the LGV Rhine-Rhône. So our next stop will be at Besançon-Franche-Comté. Here we have the railway line to Switzerland branching off again, where we had to wait for the TGV on our way to Marseille, and now we're on the LGV Rhine-Rhône again, approaching the station of Besançon-Franche-Comté. Here you can also see the regular connecting train to the city of Besançon, and we are now continuing on. Next stop will be Belfort-Montbéliard TGV, and after that we are reaching Mulhouse-Ville again. Here in Mulhouse-Ville we again use the railway line via the port of Mulhouse and Mulhouse Nord to avoid changing directions here at Mulhouse-Ville, and then we're heading on to Strasbourg-Ville, which will be our last stop in France, and then we will cross the border again back to Germany. Here we are already leaving the station of Strasbourg again, and we will now cross the Rhine again. That means that we are soon back in Germany, and in Germany we have stops again at Baden-Baden, Karlsruhe, Mannheim, and then the train will end in Frankfurt. So as I said, there was no suitable flight for me to go from Frankfurt to Marseille or back. Usually I would take a train for one journey to experience this interesting train, and then I would take the faster plane. But if there's no faster plane, of course the train is a very good option. And then there is the cheap price. Basically there's no chance to travel for less than 50 euros from Frankfurt to Marseille with any other means of transportation. Also, if you would take a very cheap flight, you would still need to pay for luggage, and then it would be also more expensive. The only downside of this train is the food quality, so also as you can see here on our way back, it was just a very cheap fast food which is sold at a quite expensive price. So I would recommend taking food from the station, for example, with you. One constructional problem of the TGV is the position of the luggage racks, because there's a luggage rack right next to the door, and one lady was just carelessly placing her luggage in the luggage rack, but she didn't realize that she was blocking the entrance door to our compartment, and there were passengers trying to board, but the door couldn't open because the luggage was in the way, so I had to get up and remove her luggage. So that's quite a problem. I think it's also a safety issue, but that's the only downside of the TGV. Otherwise, this is a very comfortable and nice train, and of course after 8 hours in a train your back hurts and it's not comfortable anymore, but it is as comfortable as a train can be. So it was still a nice and pleasant ride, even though I was happy when we were arriving back in Frankfurt. And once again, we were arriving there on time after 7 hours and 50 minutes. It was a very interesting train adventure, and I can recommend the train especially because of the low ticket fare. It's a very good alternative to a plane or to a car. In the next videos you will see why I was going to Marseille. Here you can see when this next video will be uploaded and the name of the song. As always, I'd like to say thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to comment, like, subscribe or share the video link, and I hope to see you in my next video then.